He leaves me pregnant. My only hope is a Playboy alpha. Werewolf Shifter Romance Podcast. The village of Greyhaven lay cloaked in mist, as if the morning itself was afraid to wake. Tall trees, dark and silent, line the outskirts, their twisted branches scratching at the pale sky. Birds did not sing here, not anymore. The villagers whispered of old curses and darker things that lurked in the forests, but few dared speak openly. Fear was a quiet companion in every home. At the edge of the village, in a small weathered cottage, Evelyn sat by the window, her hands resting on her stomach. She could feel the soft life growing inside her, a gentle rhythm that pulsed like her own heartbeat. But joy could not settle here. Not yet. Not when he, the father, had left without a word, without even a glance back. His betrayal had been swift, leaving her with fear, worry, and the heavy weight of loneliness. The wind rattled the window pane, as if reminding her that she was alone. Her brown eyes, wide and anxious, followed the movement of the trees. Every shadow seemed to shift unnaturally, and every creak of the floor sounded louder than it should. She hugged her small belly, a fragile shield against the world outside. The life she carried was innocent, yet it tied her to a future she could not face alone. Aveline's thoughts were interrupted by a distant howl. It rolled over the hills and pierced the still morning air. She froze. Greyhaven was no stranger to wolves, but this was different. The sound carried something ancient, something more than just a wild animal. A chill ran down her spine, and she pressed her hand against the window pane as though she could stop the world from coming closer. A rustle in the bushes made her heart leap. She backed away from the window, scanning the garden with cautious eyes. Something, or someone, was moving. The hair on her arms stood on end. She knew she should call out, but the fear lodged in her throat. Her parents had always warned her. Never answer the forest. It doesn't like visitors. The door creaked open before she could decide. A shadow filled the threshold and she froze, unsure whether to scream or run. The figure stepped inside with deliberate calm, the air around him carrying strength and danger. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that seemed to pierce straight into her soul. His presence was commanding, undeniable. "I am here to help," he said, his voice deep and steady. There was no warmth, not yet, but no threat either. It was strange to hear a voice that could have belonged to a storm. Powerful, but not cruel. Aveline's instinct told her to lock the door, to hide, to pretend she was not alone. But the howl returned, closer this time, and she knew she had no choice. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Call me Kale," he replied, "and if you stay here, you won't survive the night." The air in the cottage seemed to thicken. Aveline's heart pounded. She wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, but something in his gaze silenced her. There was a force in him, like the forest itself had taken shape in human form. He was a predator, yes, but one that could protect her if she let him. "Why me?" she asked finally, stepping back as fear mixed with curiosity. "Why should you care?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer, careful to give her space. "Because you carry something they all want," he said, eyes darkening. "Something that belongs to neither the villagers nor the hunters who roam the woods. Something powerful."
Aveline frowned, trying to make sense of his words.
"I don't understand." "You will," he said softly, almost a warning. Then, abruptly, the howl came again, louder, more urgent. Kale's entire body stiffened, and his eyes narrowed. "We need to move," he said, grabbing a cloak from the hook by the door. "Now." She hesitated. Leaving meant stepping into the unknown. Staying meant certain danger. Her mind raced, but the life inside her reminded her that fear was no longer just her own. She could not fail this little heartbeat. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. Kale's expression softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. He held out his hand, and she took it, finding comfort in his grip. There was warmth there, a promise, and something else she could not name. A strange sense of trust forming in the midst of fear. They stepped outside, and the mist swallowed them whole. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. Cale moved with silent assurance, every step deliberate, his senses attuned to dangers she could not see. Evelyn struggled to keep pace, clutching her cloak tightly around her belly. "Why are they after me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Cale glanced at her, his jaw tightening. "Because you are not like the others, the life you carry. It awakens things long thought dormant, things that should have stayed asleep." Abilene shivered both from the cold and the weight of his words. "Dormant things? You mean monsters?" Cale did not answer immediately. Instead, he stopped at a clearing and scanned the surrounding trees. Shadows shifted unnaturally in the fog, and the hairs on her neck stood on end. Then she saw them, figures moving among the trees, silent, watching, waiting. "They are not monsters," Cale finally said, voice low. "They are hunters, and they do not care what they destroy to get what they want." Fear clenched Aveline's chest, but Cale's presence, firm and unwavering, gave her a strange courage. "Then we fight?" she asked, her voice small but resolute. Cale looked at her, and for the first time, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "We survive," he corrected. "We do not fight. Not yet. Survival is our first step." He led her deeper into the forest, moving with a confidence she could neither match nor fully understand. The mist seemed thicker here, swallowing their forms and muffling sound, but Cale's senses were sharper. He paused at every strange noise, every movement in the fog. Hours passed, though Aveline could not tell. Fatigue clawed at her, but she could not stop. Every step felt heavier, but she had no choice. The forest was alive with unseen eyes, and the howl of wolves echoed endlessly, a reminder that danger was always near. Finally, they reached a small cave hidden behind hanging vines. Cale motioned for her to enter first. Inside, it was dim but safe. Aveline sank to the ground, pressing her hands to her face. She was exhausted, terrified, but alive. Cale crouched beside her, studying her carefully. "You will be safe here for now," he said. "But the hunters will not give up, and neither will the darkness that follows you." Abilene lifted her head, meeting his gaze. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. Cale's eyes softened, though the darkness in them never fully left. "Because you have something worth protecting," he said. "And because, for the first time in a long time, someone reminds me why I should care about the world." She blinked, unsure whether to be touched or frightened by the honesty in his words. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing a strange vulnerability beneath the hardened exterior. For a moment, silence filled the cave. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the distance the faint sound of claws on earth reminded them that the world was not yet safe. But inside, in this fragile moment, something unspoken began to grow. A connection forged in fear, trust, and the unyielding will to survive. Aveline pressed her hands to her stomach again, feeling the life that tied them together. She looked at Cale, and though she did not fully understand the depth of what she felt, she knew one thing. She could not face the dangers ahead alone, and neither could she face them without him. The howl came again, louder, more insistent, echoing through the forest. Cale stood, his body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. "They are close," he said, "and we are not alone." Abilene's heart pounded. She knew instinctively that her life and the life of her child was about to change forever. And with that, Cale's eyes met hers, steady, dark, and unyielding. "We move at dawn," he said. "If we survive the night, we begin a journey that cannot be undone." Aveline nodded, fear and anticipation warring within her. She curled up near the fire, listening to the sounds outside the cave, and realized that the world she had known, the quiet village, the simple life, was gone. In its place was something dangerous, thrilling, and unknown. And in the darkness, a bond began to form, fragile but unbreakable, between the lone mother-to-be and the mysterious alpha who had chosen to protect her at any cost. The forest was quiet now, but the quiet was heavy. Every shadow seemed to watch Aveline as she followed Cale through the misted paths. Her steps were careful, tentative, but Cale moved with confidence, his senses tuned to dangers she could not see. The moonlight fell in slivers through the thick canopy above, illuminating the silver streaks in Cale's dark hair as he moved silently ahead. Aveline's heart beat faster, not just from fear, but from the closeness of him. His presence was commanding, yet oddly comforting. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, a silent strength that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. Yet every glance she dared to steal was met with his piercing eyes, reminding her that he was not just a protector. He was a force she could never truly control. "Cale," she whispered, hesitantly breaking the silence. "Where are we going?" He paused for a moment, then turned his gaze toward her, eyes glinting with something she could not name. "Somewhere safe," he said finally, "for tonight at least. You need rest, and the child, it needs quiet." She looked down at her stomach, feeling the gentle movement of the life growing inside her. The thought of keeping this little heartbeat safe had been with her every moment since she had discovered she was pregnant. She swallowed hard, a mix of fear and hope rising within her. "What about the hunters?" she asked softly. "Will they find us?" Cale's jaw tightened. "They may try, but not tonight. I've covered our tracks and the forest itself is our ally for now." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But you need to understand, Aveline. The world you knew is gone. The child you carry is not ordinary. It carries power that could change everything if the wrong people take notice." Evelyn shivered, unsure whether to feel fear or awe. Power? Change? She did not understand what he meant, but she felt its weight pressing on her shoulders like the mist itself. "I don't know if I can protect it," she admitted, her voice trembling. Cale's gaze softened, just slightly, enough to make her heart skip a beat. "You're stronger than you realize," he said. "Stronger than I expected, and you will not be alone. Not while I breathe." The forest opened to a small clearing where Cale had built a hidden shelter. It was simple, made of wood and stone, but it radiated warmth. A small fire crackled in the center, and the air smelled faintly of pine and smoke. Cale motioned for her to sit, and she obeyed, sinking onto a soft blanket he had laid out. As she rested, Cale moved to the edge of the clearing, scanning the surrounding trees. He was alert, every muscle coiled, yet there was a calm precision in the way he moved. Aveline watched him, her curiosity growing alongside her trust. Despite his fierce presence, he carried a careful respect. He had not touched her, had not forced her to act in any way. There was a space between them, a tension that hummed like electricity. "You are different from others," she said, finally breaking the silence. "Why do you care? Why risk yourself for me?" Cale's eyes softened in the firelight, but only for a moment. "Because the world has been cruel to too many who are innocent," he said quietly. "And because I've learned that protecting someone worth protecting is better than standing alone in the dark." Aveline blinked, unsure what to say. There was an honesty in him that felt dangerous, not in a physical sense, but in the way it reached into her heart. She wanted to speak, to ask more questions, but the forest had begun to stir again. The wind shifted, carrying an uneasy whisper through the trees. Kyle stiffened, eyes narrowing. "They are near," he murmured, almost to himself. Aveline's pulse quickened. "Who? Hunters!" he said. "And other things!" "Things you are not ready to see yet." Her stomach twisted with fear. She had survived so far, but the thought that more dangers awaited was terrifying. Yet Cale's presence was a tether, keeping her from panicking entirely. She trusted him, not completely, but enough to believe he would not let her fall. The night passed slowly. Cale kept a watchful eye on the shadows while Aveline tried to rest. Sleep came in short, uneasy bursts, each time interrupted by the distant howl of wolves or the snapping of branches. She could feel her senses heightening, as though the forest itself was teaching her to notice danger before it came. By dawn, Aveline had learned to move quietly, to listen for the faintest sound, to sense the weight of presence around her. Cale noticed, and a small approving nod from him made her feel more capable than she had in days. "You are learning fast," he said, his tone almost casual, though his eyes remained sharp. "That is good. You will need every bit of this skill if we are to survive." Aveline nodded, determined to meet his expectations. Yet even as she moved with caution, she felt a strange connection to him, a pull she could not explain. Every time he glanced at her, her breath caught. Every time his hand brushed against hers, even by accident, a shiver ran through her. As the sun rose, the forest lightened, revealing more of the world around them. Trees stretched high and strong, rivers sparkled in the distance, and distant hills rolled gently toward the horizon. For a moment, the world felt almost normal, peaceful even. But Cale's eyes remained vigilant, scanning the shadows as if he knew something she could not. "Aveline," he said finally, his voice low, "you need to understand the rules of my world. The hunters are not the only danger. There are creatures older than this forest, beings bound by magic and curse. Your child carries a spark of that magic. Some will seek to protect it, some will seek to destroy it. You must learn to control your fear, or it will control you." Aveline's hands trembled as she held her stomach. "Control fear?" she whispered. "How can I do that when everything feels so dangerous?" Cale stepped closer, crouching to meet her gaze. "By facing it," he said. "By learning that you are not powerless, even when the world seems to say otherwise. And you will not be alone in this. I will not leave you." For the first time since she had been abandoned, Aveline felt something she had not expected. Hope. Not the naive kind, but a fragile, careful hope, like a candle flickering in the wind. She trusted him, just a little, and in that trust she found courage. Their days became a rhythm of training and survival. Cale taught her to move silently through the forest, to notice sounds and smells, to anticipate danger before it arrived. He taught her the ways of his kind, the subtle signs of shifts, the strength of controlled power. Slowly, Aveline realized that she was not as helpless as she had believed. Her instincts were sharp, her reactions quickening, and her confidence grew with every lesson. Yet it was not just survival that grew between them. The tension that had simmered from the first night began to deepen. Cale's glances lingered longer than necessary. His voice softened when he spoke to her alone, and his presence felt like a shield she could lean against. She, in turn, felt drawn to him, a pull she could not resist. Fear, desire, trust. They mingled in her chest like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the forest in shades of gold and crimson, Aveline finally spoke the question that had been haunting her. "Cale, why me? Why is my child different? Why do they want it?" Cale's face darkened, shadowed by the dying light. "Because the blood you carry is rare. It is tied to the old magic, the kind that can shift balance in the world. Your child will have a choice, a power, and there are those who would take it for their gain without care for consequences." Aveline's breath caught. "So, I am carrying something dangerous?" Kyle shook his head. "No. You are carrying something precious, something that could protect or destroy, depending on the choices you and your child make. And that is why I will not leave you. I will teach you. I will protect you." For a moment, silence fell between them, heavy and intimate. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across their faces. Aveline's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the closeness of Cale. His words, his presence, the care in his voice, it reached into a place she had long thought closed. Before either of them could speak again, the howl returned. Louder, closer, more urgent. Cale's body tensed instantly, every muscle alert. He moved to the entrance of the shelter, scanning the trees with sharp eyes.
They are coming, he said. Aveline's heart raced.
Who? The hunters? Kyle nodded, jaw tight. And possibly others. Stay close. Trust me, and nothing will touch you tonight. As he prepared for the night's danger, Evelyn realized something profound. She was no longer alone, no longer entirely afraid. With Kale beside her, with her child growing inside her, she felt a courage she had never known. And though the night was coming, full of shadows and threats, she knew one thing: survival was only the beginning. And as the darkness closed around them, a bond was forming, stronger than fear, more urgent than desire, and more unbreakable than either of them yet realized. The forest had grown darker, heavier, as though the night itself was aware of what was to come. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the trees, and the wind whispered secrets that only Kale seemed to understand. Aveline followed closely, her hand resting on her belly as she moved with careful steps. She had grown stronger, more aware of her surroundings, yet fear still gripped her like a cold hand at the base of her spine. Kale walked ahead, his form steady, a protective shadow. But tonight, there was tension in his shoulders, a subtle edge she had not noticed before. He had become more than a guide, more than a protector. He had become a presence she could not ignore, a force that drew her attention, her thoughts, and her heart, even as the danger around them grew. "Kyle," she said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for hours. "Why do they want me so badly? The hunters, the others. Why is it always me?" Kale stopped, turning to face her. His dark eyes glinted in the moonlight, both stern and uncertain. "Because you carry something rare," he said. "Something powerful, tied to an old magic that has not been seen in generations. Your child will have that same power, whether they want it or not. And power like that, well, it draws attention, sometimes dangerous attention." Aveline's heart clenched. "So I'm a target because of my child? Because of me?" Kael stepped closer, but not too close. His voice softened. "Yes. And that is why I will not let anything happen to you. To either of you." The words made her chest ache, not with fear, but with something deeper. Gratitude, hope, and something else she could not name. She had been alone for so long, abandoned, frightened, and now, even amidst this danger, she felt a spark of comfort in his presence. They moved on, the forest twisting around them as though guiding their path. The air was thick with anticipation, and Evelyn could feel the pulse of her child within her, a steady heartbeat that reminded her that survival was more than just escaping the night. It was protecting life, protecting hope. Hours passed, and they reached a small glade hidden from the shadows of the hunters. Here, Kale finally stopped, kneeling beside the fire he had built. The warmth was soothing, and for the first time in days, Aveline felt her muscles loosen. She sank onto a blanket, brushing leaves from her hair. "You've learned much," Kale said, settling near her. "Faster than I expected." Aveline smiled faintly, feeling a surge of pride.
"I had a good teacher," she said softly.
Kale's eyes flickered toward her, and for a moment the tension between them thickened. She could feel it, an unspoken pull, a current beneath the surface that neither of them fully understood. He was close enough for her to feel the heat of his body, but he maintained a careful distance, as if respecting the fragile space between them. "The bond you share with your child, it is stronger than you know," Kale said, his voice low. "It awakens things inside you, things that can protect and sometimes things that can hurt." Eveline's brow furrowed. "Hurt?" "Yes," Kale admitted. "The magic inside you is not ordinary. It is old, and it is wild. It is tied to forces that do not forgive weakness. You must learn control, or the power will control you." Fear gripped her, but Kale reached out, his hand brushing hers, light and reassuring. "But you are not alone. I will help you." "You and the child. You will not face this alone." The touch sent a shiver through her, not from fear, but from something more. something that reached into her heart. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw not just a protector, but a man who had known loss, who had hidden his own heart behind strength and fear. The night grew quiet, the forest holding its breath. But suddenly, a rustle in the trees made both of them tense. Cale's eyes narrowed, his body moving instinctively between Aveline and the approaching danger. From the shadows, figures emerged, hunters and others she could not immediately recognize. They moved silently, their eyes glinting in the firelight. Cale rose, his stance protective and commanding. "Stay behind me," he warned, his voice low. "Do not move until I tell you." Aveline nodded, gripping the blanket beneath her tightly. Her heart raced, but she did not run. She had learned from Cale, learned to trust her instincts, learned that she had strength she had never known. The hunters approached, but Cale did not strike immediately. Instead, he observed, calculating, waiting for the right moment. The air seemed to hum with tension, the forest itself holding its breath. Then, with a sudden movement, Cale shifted, his form changing, his body rippling with power. He was no longer just a man, but a creature of strength, speed, and unyielding presence. Aveline gasped, but she did not flee. She had seen glimpses before, but the full transformation was breathtaking. The alpha before her was a force of nature, fierce and unstoppable, yet controlled by something deeper than instinct. The hunters faltered, uncertain, and Cale moved with precision, sending them scattering without a single word. When the threat was gone, he returned to her side, his form shifting back to human, his dark eyes soft once more. "You are safe," he said, voice steady, for now. Aveline exhaled, relief flooding her. That was incredible," she whispered. "But terrifying too." Cale's lips curved slightly. "Terrifying can be good. It reminds you that life is fragile, that you must protect what matters most." He paused, his gaze lingering on her.
And I will protect you.
"Always." The words sent warmth through her, but they also stirred something more, a longing, a connection that went beyond survival. She realized that her feelings for Cale were no longer just trust or gratitude. They were deeper, complicated, and impossible to ignore. For the next days, they stayed in the hidden glade, training and preparing. Cale taught her to sense the presence of others, to read the subtle changes in the wind, to understand the quiet language of the forest. Each lesson was a step toward control, toward power, toward survival. And each lesson brought them closer, not just as protector and protected, but as two souls connected by circumstance, danger, and the fragile hope of something more. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Aveline finally asked the question that had been pressing on her heart. "Cale, what will happen if they find me again, if the hunters return?" Cale's expression darkened, shadowed by the firelight.
"Then we fight," he said.
"But not just for survival, for freedom. And for you, for the child, for everything you were meant to be." Aveline swallowed, her throat tight. "And you? What about you?" Cale looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening. "I have made my choice," he said quietly. "Whatever comes, I will not leave you. I cannot." The words were simple yet powerful, and she felt the weight of them deep in her chest. She wanted to ask more, to understand the depth of his feelings, but the forest stirred once again. The howl came first, a single long note that rolled across the hills, then another, closer, urgent, demanding attention. Cale's body tensed, muscles coiled, and his eyes scanned the shadows. "They are close," he said. "Closer than before. We need to move." Aveline rose, her legs unsteady but determined. She trusted him. She would follow him through darkness, through danger, because she had no other choice, and because deep down she knew she wanted to. As they moved through the forest, the bond between them strengthened. Fear had brought them together, but trust, respect, and something deeper were keeping them aligned. Each step, each glance, Each shared silence built a connection neither fully understood, yet both felt intensely. Finally, they reached a hidden stream, its waters glinting under the moonlight. Kyle stopped, kneeling to inspect the surroundings. "We will rest here for a while," he said. "The night is not over, but this place is safe for now." Aveline sank to the ground, brushing her hair from her face. She felt the life within her, strong and steady, and realized that she was no longer just surviving. She was learning to fight, to protect, to exist in a world filled with danger and wonder. Cale settled near her, his presence a comforting weight. For a long time neither spoke, listening instead to the sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, the gentle flow of the stream. And then, softly he said, "Aveline, you are not just carrying a child, you are carrying hope. And together we will face whatever comes." Her heart swelled at the words. "Together?" she whispered. Cale nodded, his dark eyes locking with hers. "Together, no matter what." The night stretched on, filled with quiet anticipation, shared fear, and an unspoken bond that neither could deny. Outside, the forest remained alive with threats, but within that small circle of firelight and shadow, Aveline realized something she had not felt in a long time. She was not alone. And as the moon rose high, casting silver light across their faces, she knew that survival was no longer enough. The journey ahead would test them, challenge them, and change them. But whatever came, they would face it side by side. For the first time since her abandonment, Aveline allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for something more, for protection, for trust, and perhaps for love. The forest had never felt so heavy. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound sharper than before. Aveline could feel it. The hunters, the dark creatures that had been pursuing her since the day she learned of her child, were closer now than ever. She held her belly protectively, her heart pounding, but she no longer trembled in fear as she had when she first met Cale. She had grown stronger, sharper, and braver. Gael moved beside her, his presence solid and unwavering. His eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the forest with a predator's instinct. Every movement he made radiated confidence, yet there was tension in his posture she had never seen. She knew he felt the weight of the coming confrontation, the same heavy responsibility that rested on her shoulders. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly, though her gaze was steady. Kyle glanced at her, his jaw tightening.
"Yes, they are near."
"And this time, it will not be just a test. This will be the battle for your child's future, and for ours." Aveline nodded. She had long known that danger was part of her life now, but the thought of losing everything she had fought for tightened her chest. She drew a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "Then we face it. Together." Cale's dark eyes softened, just slightly. "Together," he repeated. The night fell fully as they reached a clearing. Moonlight spilled across the ground, illuminating the approaching figures in the distance. Hunters, their weapons glinting, and strange shadowed shapes, creatures older than memory, had gathered around them. They had come not just for the child, but for the power that Aveline carried. Cale stepped in front of her instinctively, his body coiled like a spring. "Stay close," he warned. "Do exactly as I say, and we will survive." Aveline nodded, her fear tempered by determination. She had learned much from Cale: how to sense danger, how to trust her instincts, how to protect herself. And now she would need every lesson. The creatures advanced, their movements fluid and silent. Cale shifted, his form rippling as he transformed into his alpha form. Muscles tensed, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, and power radiated from him like a storm. Aveline watched in awe and fear. He was terrifyingly strong, yet controlled. The sight of him standing between her and the danger filled her with a strange courage. "They are strong," Cale muttered, eyes scanning every movement. "But together, we are stronger." Aveline felt the power within her stir, the dormant magic tied to her child. responding to the threat. A warmth spread through her body, a steady energy that made her feel connected, not just to her child, but to KL, to the forest, to the strength she had been learning to trust. The hunters struck first, their weapons aimed at Kale. He moved with lightning speed, deflecting their attacks and keeping them at bay. His strength was unmatched, but Evelyn noticed something in his movements. He was careful not to expose her. Every strike, every dodge, every roar was precise. Then the shadowed creatures came, moving in ways that seemed unnatural. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine, but the warmth inside her, the power within, pushed her forward. She raised her hands instinctively, and a wave of energy flowed from her, forcing the shadows back. The creatures hissed and recoiled, surprised by the strength of her magic. Kale's eyes widened slightly, but only briefly. "Good," he said. "Focus. Control it." Aveline concentrated, feeling the rhythm of her child's heartbeat, the flow of magic through her veins, the energy in the forest around them. Slowly she learned to guide the power, to shape it, to use it to protect rather than harm. Together she and KL formed an unspoken bond, a circle of strength that the hunters and creatures could not penetrate. The battle raged, but gradually the attackers began to falter. Kale fought with ferocity, but his eyes never left Aveline, always making sure she was safe. And she, in turn, moved with purpose, her magic growing stronger with every moment. Finally, with a coordinated effort, they sent the hunters retreating into the trees, and the shadowed creatures dissolving into the night. The forest fell silent again, the tension lifting like a held breath released. Kale shifted back into human form, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning for any remaining threat. Aveline approached him cautiously, her legs unsteady from adrenaline, from fear, from relief.
"You did it," she whispered. We
survived." "No," he said firmly. "You did it. I protected you, yes, but the power came from you. You controlled it. You are stronger than you realize." Aveline looked down at her belly, feeling the tiny life inside her. She realized that she had never been truly alone. Even when she felt abandoned, even when fear gripped her, she had carried strength within her, waiting to be awakened. And Kale had been there, not to take control, but to guide, to protect, to trust. For the first time, she allowed herself to look at him fully, to see not just the protector, but the man beneath the alpha. The tension between them, the pull that had been growing since their first night together, was undeniable. She felt something warm spread through her chest, something she could not name but could not ignore. Kale's eyes met hers, and in that moment, the danger faded. The forest seemed to hold its breath again, but this time, it was not fear. It was stillness, quiet and reverent. "You are incredible," Kale said softly. "Not just because of your power, but because of your heart. You care, you fight, you protect. You are remarkable." Aveline's cheeks flushed. "I had a good teacher," she said, her voice shaking slightly. KL smiled faintly, the first real smile she had seen from him. "And you have been an even better student," he said. "I am proud of you." The words, simple and honest, made her heart ache. She wanted to say more, to tell him how much she trusted him, how much she needed him, how much she cared. But the forest reminded her that even victories came with responsibility. The journey was not over, not entirely, and they had survived this night, but the world still held dangers they could not foresee. Kyle stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Aveline, whatever comes next, I will not leave you. Not you. Not your child." "I promise." Her chest tightened at his words. She could see the truth in his eyes, the strength, the loyalty, the care, and she realized fully that she had begun to feel something deeper, something that went beyond trust and gratitude. She had begun to love him, not blindly, not recklessly, but with a careful, measured heart that had been strengthened by everything they had endured together. I trust you," she whispered. "More than anyone. More than I thought possible. Cale reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, careful, but full of intensity.
"And I trust you," he said.
"You are not alone, Abeline. You never will be again." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the bond between them unspoken but undeniable. The fire crackled, casting warm light across their faces, and the night stretched around them, peaceful for the first time in weeks. Abeline felt the life inside her stir again, and a wave of warmth passed through her. She realized that this child, this little heartbeat, was not just a source of danger, but a source of connection, a reason for hope, a reason to fight and to protect and to love. Cale took her hand gently, his thumb brushing over hers. "We have a future," he said quietly. "One we will build together. Danger may always be near, but so will we." She nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. "Together," she echoed. And in that quiet forest, under the watchful eyes of the moon and stars, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, of trust, of fragile happiness. The dangers of the night had been overcome, the threats faced, and the power of her child had been recognized not as a curse, but as a gift, one that they would protect, nurture, and guide together. Cale drew closer, protective, reassuring, and Evelyn felt the warmth of his presence surround her. The tension that had lingered between them, the pull of trust, desire, and unspoken emotion, was now something they could acknowledge, something they could cherish. "Rest," Cale said softly, his hand brushing her hair again. "Tomorrow we begin a new journey, but tonight we rest. And safe, together." Aveline leaned against him, feeling the steady strength of his body, the calm of his breathing, the certainty that he would not leave her. And as she closed her eyes, a smile touched her lips. She had survived, she had fought, and she had found someone to trust completely, someone who would be with her through danger, through fear, through life itself. And for the first time since the day she had been abandoned, Aveline allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for a life full of love, strength, and the unbreakable bond that had grown between her and the Alpha who had chosen her. The night stretched around them calm and still, as the first stars twinkled overhead. The forest had watched, the threats had passed, and a bond had been forged stronger than any shadow, deeper than any fear. Together, Aveline and Cale sat, side by side, their hands entwined, their hearts aligned. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. And with the child growing inside her, with Cale beside her, and with the forest watching silently, Aveline knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone.